Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is honestly one of the most cinematic moments in recent tech history. Picture this. It's the morning of August 17th, 2026. On one side, you have Cursor, completely fresh off a staggering $60 billion all-stock acquisition by SpaceX, beginning the staged rollout of its highly anticipated new code hosting platform, Origin. And on the exact same day, you have GitHub, the absolute undisputed titan of the developer ecosystem, suffering a massive, sprawling, multi-hour outage. It was a collision that instantly set the entire tech world on fire. But we have to ask ourselves, are we actually looking at the real story here, or are we just getting entirely caught up in the drama?
Okay, let's dive right into this timeline because the coincidence here is just epic. At exactly 10 a.m. UTC, Cursor starts sending out these early access invitations for Origin to its paid users. Then, just a few hours later, at 1:40 p.m. UTC, GitHub starts falling over. We're talking severely degraded performance across actions, APIs, webhooks, pull requests, the whole shebang. At its peak, archive downloads were seeing a 50% failure rate. This disruption dragged on for nearly 8 agonizing hours before GitHub finally resolved it around 9:15 p.m. I mean, you literally could not script a better launch day for a competitor.
And man, the internet absolutely devoured the irony of this. Social media basically crowned Cursor the winner right then and there on the spot, treating this as a flawless competitive strike against a decaying legacy incumbent. You had Matt Palmer, a Cursor employee, posting this incredibly viral joke on X, saying, "Cursor meant to ship earlier, but GitHub was down." It was just the perfect headline, right? A total masterclass in unintentional marketing. The narrative was cemented immediately. The nimble AI-native upstart had somehow caught the lumbering giant at its absolute weakest moment. But since we're here to actually dig deeper, we need to ask ourselves a much harder, way more provocative question. Are we really watching the beginning of the end of GitHub's dominance? Or are we just confusing a perfect headline with a genuinely disruptive product? You see, in the venture capital world, there's this trap called founder delusion, where people confuse a statistically remarkable coincidence with a massive structural market shift. So to figure out if GitHub is truly being displaced, we need to take off the hype goggles for a minute and investigate what's actually happening at the infrastructure layer. Section 1. Separating hype from reality. Let's get right into it and separate the actual verified facts from the internet speculation. This breakdown brilliantly illustrates the gap between the viral narrative and reality. Look at the launch staging. Popular speculation claimed Cursor shipped Origin in real time as an emergency alternative to the outage. While the verified fact, enterprise product launches like this are locked weeks in advance. There's zero evidence of deliberate timing. It was just pure coincidence. What about the outage impact? Speculation said it caused permanent damage, forcing massive immediate migrations. The fact is, it was a temporary degradation and no data was actually lost. But most importantly, look at repository authority. People were screaming that Origin completely replaces the need for GitHub. But in reality, for mirrored repositories, GitHub remains the authoritative source of truth. In fact, when you compare Origin's reality to GitHub's role, you see that Origin actually launched as a highly constrained early beta. It's using this incredibly clever wedge strategy. Cursor isn't forcing enterprise teams to execute some risky, painful migration away from GitHub. No way. Instead, you just sync your repository to Origin. You can browse, review, and have AI agents make pull requests entirely inside the Cursor editor. But when you push, those pushes are routed right back to GitHub. GitHub remains the canonical source of truth. Cursor isn't killing GitHub today. They're essentially sitting on top of it to capture developer attention. Which brings us to Section 2, the real GitHub disruption. Let's shift our focus away from the drama of the August 17th outage and look at the underlying structural flaws that are really causing GitHub debacle. Because August 17th, that was not an isolated incident. 257. That is the staggering number of distinct GitHub service incidents recorded between May 2025 and April 2026. If you do the math, that averages out to roughly one significant disruption every single week. And here's the real kicker. 57 of those outages were related to GitHub Actions alone. The platform is clearly under immense, unprecedented strain. And this operational strain is causing real-world enterprise fatigue. Take Mitchell Hashimoto, the co-founder of HashiCorp. In April 2026, he made the super high-profile decision to move his project, Ghosty, completely off the platform. He stated bluntly that GitHub is no longer a place for serious work. Now, that is a devastating critique from an industry heavyweight. It highlights this growing, massive frustration among developers who feel that legacy code hosts just aren't reliable enough for modern workflows anymore. But why exactly is GitHub struggling so much all of a sudden? Well, the root cause of that strain isn't just bad servers. According to Runtime Wire, 35% of all pull requests merged within the Cursor platform are now opened autonomously by cloud-based AI agents, over a third. So the fundamental problem here is the explosive volume of machine-generated code. GitHub was built for human speeds, right? And now it's being entirely flooded by autonomous agents operating at machine speeds. And that takes us to Section 3, when agents write code. Let's really look at how this transition to parallel agentic code generation is breaking all our old assumptions.
Think about the traditional software lifecycle for a second. A human developer writes code, makes a Git commit, opens a pull request, waits around for a human colleague to peer review it, and then it merges. This process is linear, it's deliberate, and it's highly conversational. GitHub was perfectly elegantly designed for this exact human-centric pace. A pull request was meant to be a small, understandable package of changes that you could literally chat about with a coworker over a coffee.
But now contrast that with the totally new reality of machine speed. Here's the emerging agentic workflow. A human director assigns a high-level task. Instantly, multiple parallel agents go to work generating code, leading to automated reviews, and finally, a human acts as the ultimate approver before the merge. We've gone from one single human typing on a keyboard to a human directing an entire fleet of asynchronous machines. And this creates massive scheduling bottlenecks, huge merge conflicts, and review queues that traditional platforms simply cannot handle. And that leads us to this massive paradox that the data calls the productivity illusion. On one hand, famous controlled trials show AI can help a developer complete a coding task 55.8% faster. Sounds great, right? But look at the enterprise reality from Google's 2024 DORA report. A 25% increase in AI usage actually correlated with a 1.5% drop in overall delivery throughput and a 7.2% drop in stability. This is crazy. AI generates code faster, sure, but because the review and integration infrastructure can't handle the sheer volume, the overall enterprise actually slows down. Which basically creates the defining metric of 2026, the trust gap. Stack Overflow's survey data is incredibly clear here. 84% of developers are adopting AI tools, but only 33% actually trust the AI's accuracy, and a massive 46% actively distrust the outputs. So as adoption skyrockets, trust plummets. When autonomous agents are submitting thousands of pull requests a day and humans don't trust the code, you get a catastrophic verification bottleneck. After all, who is checking all this machine-generated work? This gap takes us right into Section 4, the next founder opportunity. Let's zoom out to view this landscape from a startup founder or venture capital perspective, because the real opportunity here isn't just building a clone of GitHub, it's building the specialized infrastructure that is entirely missing right now. Let's be honest, traditional platforms like GitHub or GitLab simply were not built for this. They weren't built for the enormous commit volume of cloud agents. They definitely weren't built for parallel branch management when you have dozens of bots refactoring the exact same files simultaneously. They weren't built to handle automated PR overload. They completely lack the tools for tracking code provenance, knowing exactly which AI model wrote which line of code for legal compliance. They lack strict permission boundaries to stop a rogue agent from accidentally deleting a database. And they lack persistent memory, meaning these agents often just forget the architecture of the code base they're even working on. So the crucial point is this. The next massive founder opportunity is actually building this missing AI infrastructure layer. We desperately need startups focused on code provenance and lineage. We need agent governance and sandboxing to limit the blast radius of these autonomous bots. We need deep observability and runtime verification to ensure the AI's logic actually holds up in production. And we need persistent semantic memory so agents actually understand the institutional knowledge of a software project. The true multi-billion-dollar prize isn't another code host. It's building the specialized control plane to manage the agents themselves. Which finally brings us to Section 5, the contrarian conclusion. Let's look at the three possible futures for this $127 billion AI coding market. We've got three main scenarios playing out. Scenario A is the displacement cycle,
where Cursor's origin genuinely replaces GitHub over the next decade as workflows entirely move into the editor. Then there's scenario B, the incumbent defense, where GitHub's massive enterprise ecosystem, their security certifications, and CI/CD pipelines just prove way too sticky, and GitHub holds strong. But while scenarios A and B are the ones dominating the social media headlines, all the data and the operational bottlenecks we just looked at strongly point us to scenario C, the control plane. This is where an entirely new infrastructure layer emerges that sits above every single code host. And this right here is the central thesis you really need to take away today. The next GitHub might not actually replace GitHub at all. It might just sit on top of it and on top of GitLab and Bitbucket to become the overriding operating system for AI software agents. Because ultimately, Git is just storage. The true prize is the routing, the governance, and the security layer that manages all these bots.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Everyone is talking about Cursor versus GitHub, but they're probably looking at the wrong layer. The drama of the outage makes a fantastic headline for sure, but the fundamental unit of software development has forever shifted from human keystrokes to autonomous agents. The companies that build the control plane to manage that chaos, they're the ones who are going to define the next decade. So take a hard look at your own tech stack. What infrastructure are you missing to manage the bot revolution? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the hype.